Now to the biggest challenge in years to the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Thousands of rebel Islamist fighters have taken over much of Syria's second largest city, Aleppo, also seizing control of the airport and dozens of towns and villages. Syria and its ally Russia have carried out airstrikes against the rebels. Assad has vowed to defeat the insurgents.
Rebel fighters celebrate in the central town square in the heart of Aleppo. They fire off victory shots, savoring a triumph that has ousted Syria's regime from here.
The happiness is indescribable, the happiness of liberating the city of Aleppo. We're now in the main square. We've been waiting for this for 10 years. It's an indescribable feeling. My older brother was martyred here in Aleppo 13 years ago. Praise to God. Praise to God.
This video purportedly shows armed gunmen in trucks seizing control of the city's civilian airport. The Syrian army admits it has lost control of much of Aleppo, which it held for 8 years. And dozens of its soldiers were killed when a coalition of rebel groups launched a surprise attack a few days ago. They seized a military base, weapons, and even tanks from Syrian government forces. The lightning offensive is led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which used to be al-Qaeda's branch in Syria before severing ties. The coalition consists of multiple groups with differing ideologies. What unites them is their opposition to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. This assault is the biggest challenge in years to his regime and has jolted the front lines of the Syrian civil war that have largely remained frozen since 2020. The rebels have also taken control of dozens of strategic towns in Hama and Idlib provinces. Russia launched a series of strikes across the city in a bid to stop the rebels. It was the first time in 8 years Russian warplanes hit Aleppo.
For more, let's bring in Marina Miron, a postdoctoral researcher in the War Studies Department at King's College. She joins us from Munich. Marina, some analysts have described this group, acronym HTS, as Islamists, yet there are reports the group has cut deals with local Druze and Christian groups. I know this is a hard question, but generally speaking, who are they?
Good evening. Well, it's a good question. The group is fairly new, so it was formed or rebranded in 2017 by Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, but it's an offspring of a more radical group which existed since 2011, the beginning of the Syrian civil war, Jabhat al-Nusra, and that group did have ties to al-Qaeda. It is a very interesting concoction here because on the one hand, this group is preaching Salafi Islam, so that's a Sunni branch of Islam, radical Islam. On the other hand, according to al-Jilani himself, he wants to unite all the opposition and he doesn't want any sectarian violence in order to challenge the Assad government. That being said, this group has been put on the foreign terrorist organization list by the United States in 2018 because the U.S. thinks it covertly works with al-Qaeda, even if it overtly denounced al-Qaeda and arrested some of the fighters within the group linked to al-Qaeda.
The rebel forces are advancing towards the city of Hama in the south. Do we know when they will stop? Have they articulated what their ultimate goal is?
Well, if we look at the military and the political strategy of HTS, their goal is to get rid of the Assad regime. So essentially the goals haven't changed since its predecessor in 2011, when 120 different factions were fighting for power in the Syrian civil war. So I think the primary target will, of course, be the Idlib province, but that said, they might go further. What we have to keep in mind is that we don't know the exact size of this group, and there were estimates of about some 20,000 fighters as of 2018. So do they actually have the ability to recruit more support amongst other factions to achieve this goal, and how the government then will look if they succeed. And of course, it depends on what the others will do, such as Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and Turkey, of course.
I mean, that leads to the next question I had in mind. I mean, this offensive is happening at a very momentous time geopolitically. In the region, we have Israel fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, fighting Hamas in Gaza, and even Iran directly at times. We know that Russia has supported Bashar al-Assad for years. Russia is now preoccupied with its invasion of Ukraine. Is any of this connected in terms of the timing of this offensive?
Well, it is connected in a way that this group, of course, looked for an opportune moment where all the key players or backers are very much busy with their bigger issues. They have bigger fish to fry. And so for the Russians, of course, this is bad news, because they are fighting in Ukraine right now, and they don't want to commit any ground troops to Syria. They didn't want to do so in 2015. They reluctantly joined the fight because of the long-standing tradition and ties between the Soviet leadership and Hafez al-Assad, who is Bashar al-Assad's father. So they cannot drop Syria. They have military bases in Tartus, a naval base, and Khmeimim, an air base. So they cannot drop Syria, but they will have to somehow send in capable units in order to support the Syrian Arab army. We have to be very careful with names, because there are many Syrian armies within Syria right now. The Assad's army, essentially. And of course, it opens up another battlefield, because the Ukrainian military intelligence has been said to be operating in Syria, supporting government opposition. So the HTS, interestingly enough, has some capabilities that have been seen in Ukraine, such as the use of FPV drones. So it looks like there is a spillover of the Ukrainian war into Syria as well in this scenario.
Marina Miron, thank you so much for joining us.
Simon Mabon is focused on the Middle East as a professor of international politics at Lancaster University in the UK, and he joins us now. Simon, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is known to be Turkish-backed, but what does that mean in practical terms?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. What does it mean in practical terms? It's a bit of an ambiguous subject, to be honest. We know that over time, Turkey and HTS have collaborated, have worked closely together, have escorted one another, provided security. But for now, we don't know exactly what it is that Turkey has done to support this latest offensive. We know that over the past decade or so, Turkey has provided a great deal of support to Islamist groups across the region. It's hosted a lot of exiled Islamist groups. So to some extent, there's an obvious link between HTS and Ankara and its foreign policy agenda. But HTS has a much more violent, much more radical ideology than many of the other quote-unquote Islamist groups that Ankara has worked with, notably the Muslim Brotherhood and its various affiliates. So there are a good deal of tensions politically, ideologically, and potentially geopolitically here between Turkey and HTS. We just don't know the granularity of these relationships.
Briefly walk us through what's at stake for Turkey here.
Well, I guess there's a number of different things. First, there's their influence in northwestern Syria, the extent to which they're able to shape what is happening in Syria. Then there's the issue of Turkish influence across the wider Middle East. There have been numerous efforts for Turkey to try and articulate a stronger presence across the region, its own vision of how the region should be ordered in accordance with a particular understanding of Islam and a particular understanding of democracy that Mr. Erdogan is articulating. But then, of course, and perhaps the most important, pertains to the Kurdish question, which is a question that resonates not only in Turkey and within Turkey proper, but with Turkish borders, with regard to Syria, with regard to Iraq, and also with regard to Iran. And balancing all of these different agendas out and interests out is a very difficult thing, but it's something that Ankara is certainly trying to do right now.
How dangerous is this for Kurds and Kurdish fighters in Syria?
Well, it's dangerous for everyone. This is a conflict. This is a conflict that's been raging for 14 years. We've seen over half 500,000 people killed in the Syrian conflict alone. We've seen 11 million people displaced from their homes. We've seen tens of millions of people who've had their lives turned upside down, their homes destroyed, their very way of life destroyed. And so whenever there is any type of fighting, it's dangerous. And of course, it's dangerous for Kurdish groups right now, trapped between the parabolic forces of HTS, of Assad, of Turkey, trying to secure their own future for themselves, for their families. They have backing from some powers, they have some support from the US, but will that be enough to allow them to circumvent these different parabolic forces, these centrifugal forces? I'm not entirely sure.
Simon Mabon from Lancaster University, many thanks to you.
Thank you.